Hello, everyone. Good morning, good evening, wherever you are, whatever your time zone. Welcome. This is Digital Transformation Talk. I am your host, Kevin Crane, and welcome to the show. Digital transformation is the process by which companies embed technologies across their businesses to drive fundamental change. The benefits: increased efficiency, greater business agility, and ultimately unlocking new value and new markets and new advantages. And while we often think of technology, the technologies involved, and the innovation that's possible, to reach meaningful success requires the right leadership and the right people to get there. Indeed, in a way, digital transformation is disrupting and reshaping corporate leadership and the C-suite as well. Roles that didn't even exist only 5 years ago are rising in prominence. The reason for this is that it's vital for senior executives to understand the far-reaching implications of digital transformation and how they may need to rethink traditional approaches to doing business. And that means technology, certainly, but also things like talent and recruitment strategies, skill sets and career paths, organizational culture and mindset, and the working style of the organization moving forward. Indeed, for digital transformation to succeed, organizations really need to reevaluate and actively manage this interaction of strategy and leadership and technology. We expect executives to spot business potential in emerging technologies and formulate winning strategies to get there, but they also need the capabilities to lead that transformation and the innovation effectively. CIOs have proven to be really remarkable and adaptable and agile in dealing with the significant changes in technologies. But when it comes to the integration of corporate culture and strategy and innovation, many experts warn us that now may be the time to institute dedicated senior leadership to digital transformation, a chief digital transformation officer, for example. And that's the subject of our discussion today: why businesses need a digital transformation leader, what some of the qualities are that are needed, and what results are possible with this change in leadership structure and focus. But before I introduce our guest panel today and our news item to start us off, I do want to say that we want to hear from you too. We'd like to encourage everyone here attending to participate today. So please join in with your comments in the chat section. And if you have a question along the way for our guests, please enter them into the Q&A feature, and I will attempt to get some of them into the flow of the show. And we'll have a few minutes also at the end for your questions. All right, so with that, let's bring on our great panel of guests today, starting with Samit Vermani. Samit is the founder and chief marketing officer at SKV Consulting. Samit, are you with us?
I am, Kevin.
Hello. Welcome aboard, Samit. Where are you calling in from?
I'm calling in from London in the United Kingdom.
Very good. Welcome. All right. Well, have a good evening this evening as we round out our day today. Joining Samit is Christine Nicolau. Christine is the global head of e-commerce strategy and performance at Diego. Christine, welcome aboard. Are you with us?
Hi, Kevin. Yeah, I'm here calling in from Athens, Greece. Very nice to be here with you.
Very nice to be with you as well. Thank you so much, Christine. All right, and let's bring aboard also Francisco Federico. Francisco is the executive director of global marketing at JLL. Francisco, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Hello,
everyone.
Welcome
Hello from
aboard,
London.
Francisco. Where are you calling in from?
London.
London as well. All right, very good. Reaching the entire world here in a sense. I'm here in the West Coast in Portland, Oregon. So welcome aboard, everybody. All right. Let's begin our discussion today by taking a look briefly at a recent article published by Forbes, written by Emmanuel Ramos, called Becoming a Best-in-Class Digital Transformation Leader. It talks about, as technology rapidly evolves, how leaders must stay ahead of the curve to become a best-in-class digital leader. It talks about a variety of things, but it really gets down to the point that, can we expect all C-suite leaders to be well-versed in all of these technologies, and as well as the implications along the enterprise and within the organization to get the job done? Has the time come for a digital transformation executive like a CTO? I'll put it out to you folks. Where do you come down on this? Samit, is the time now for a CTO officer?
So I think personally for me, I don't know necessarily that it's the time for a dedicated person at the C-suite level, but I do think that there is a need for cross-functional shifts in the C-suite to take on digital transformation responsibilities. And really, for me, it's not necessarily the digital side of it, but it's the transformation side. We often emphasize the digital, the tools, the technology, the platforms, but actually the enablement of transformation is probably the more crucial element. How many times have we seen sort of people invest in technologies and digital, pieces of technology, and then they failed because they haven't been implemented correctly, because the culture is not right or the training is not right. So I would say sort of cross-functionally sitting at the C-suite, there's a responsibility, but focus on the transformation, not the digital.
It really comes down to bringing all the pieces together, and some of those pieces aren't necessarily what we would consider to be under the guise of digital or transformation. It's really about the people and the purpose, and aligning a variety of strategies across the organization, or a variety of key performance pieces. Christine, you're a global head of e-commerce and strategy and performance at Diego. What is your experience at the C-suite level, bringing these different pieces together to ensure a more successful digital transformation?
So, Kevin, it's Diageo, but it's okay. So I would say that on one part, what Sumit is saying, that this needs to be a cross-functional effort, is absolutely true. But it also depends on the maturity of the organization. So it felt like with the pandemic boom in digital, there was a rush in many companies to start digitizing themselves. And in that case, you see that there is a need for what would be a sidecar function to get the focus and get the strategy which would be aligned with the overall strategy of the company. You need the influence on the C-level, because although there are a lot of efforts happening from the employees bottom up, there also needs to be a clear guidance from top down. And in order for that to happen, there needs to be a consensus on the C-level. And as you said in your intro, not everyone has the capabilities. It's not their job necessarily to do so, but you need someone who can bring all this information, create that strategy, align it, and make sure that it's cascaded down the organization. But again, also, as Sumit said, this is not about digital, this is about transformation. So you don't need to create a function to just run anything digital in the business. That's not their job. You need someone who is going to lead the transformational piece, the change management that's required for people to see a shift in the culture, embrace the new tools, and unlock more growth for the business.
So, Francisco, what's your perspective on this? I mean, that's a lot to bring together. Is the time now to start considering a chief digital transformation officer as part of the C-suite structure?
Yeah, I think that is a very interesting consideration. I do very much agree with Sarmit, though, that and with Christine, that really it's consensus that is fundamental at the very top level. So I think it's not necessarily about the competence around transformation per se that calls for a C-suite role. It's more having a strong advocate. So it can be the CMO, can be the CTO, the CIO. Any of these C-suite leaders can be the executive sponsor for the transformation. They can then delegate the actual execution of the strategy to an office that has the technical skill set. But what you really need at the beginning is that political capital, that commitment, that alignment across all teams, that everybody agrees we need to do this. We need to change, for instance, sales processes, or we need to digitize our business model. That needs to be something that comes from the very top. So I don't think it's necessarily about a technical transformational C-suite role. I think it's more about having at least one strong sponsor sitting at the board with a lot of gravitas, able to evangelize and push transformation vision forward, leading to a highly specialized technical office and multidisciplinary technical office to actually perform the transformation and push forward the transformation.
Interesting. I guess I'm surprised. So I guess what I'm hearing from the group here is that really it's not really about one officer, if you will, in charge of this thing. It's a group effort that needs to be part of not only the C-suite, but I guess the whole enterprise. And Vincent is commenting here in the chat feature. You hit the nail right on the head. Digital transformation is not a one-man affair. None of these people, the CIO or the CTO or whatever, is wholly responsible for digital transformation. Rather, setting up a multi-stakeholder leadership team would mean tracking multiple initiatives, and at the same time maximizing the growth and so forth. So I'll put this out to the group then. If I am a CIO or a business owner and I'm at the C-suite, I am concerned that we are not moving forward as ardently and with as much progress as I would like to see in terms of our transformation digitally. What should I do about that? How do I approach my leadership and indeed my organization to then strengthen our acumen when it comes to digital transformation? How do I do that at the C-suite? I'll put that out to the group here. Christine, what are your thoughts?
Well, Kevin, we did talk about having the consensus and that this is going to be a cross-functional effort, but does not mean that you don't need a gravitational point, right? You need someone who is going to be accountable for this. And you need to align with the leadership team that there is going to be a clear set of accountabilities. Who is going to be the one leading within the organization, the different work streams that will come as a natural result of having those conversations. And from my experience so far, it's not something that suddenly will come top down. As I said, there's already a lot of work being done within the organizations, and it's a matter of bringing that work together, streamlining the processes, and putting some structure to make sure that it's aligned with the strategy, because this is not something that's happening just to tick a box. It's now the year of digitization. Let's just transform ourselves. This is really about unlocking growth for the company. And if a company does not disrupt from within, it will be disrupted from outside, and they're not going to like it.
Francisco, what are your thoughts? Again, my scenario, I'm the leader of a business. I'm concerned that we're not moving forward with as much success as I'd like in terms of our digital initiatives. What do I do at the C-suite level then, aside from perhaps assigning a chief officer to then bring all of that acumen to the group in a more productive way?
Well, I think at the risk of sounding banal, I think probably the best way to approach this would be to start very small and bring to the board a very specific, very tangible, very commercial use case that would benefit from some sort of transformation. It can be a process transformation, a business transformation, digital transformation, but really starting small, because I think what scares the board often is the investment and the fact they don't really understand how this will cost, not just from a technology perspective, but also from a skills and resources perspective. So if you approach them with 20 slides and a huge transformation initiative, it's going to be very difficult. Whereas if you approach it from the angle of solving for a very specific and concrete commercial problem they have with a fairly small pilot you can deploy, that can be your Trojan horse. I often talk internally at JLL of Trojan horses, try to identify those smaller initiatives that you can deploy, almost flying under the radar. They get approved because they don't really cost a lot of money. And they, as I said, solve a real problem. But then at the end of the line, once you deliver them, you actually have a proof point that can scale. And then you generate the appetite to drive change across the organization.
Very good. And Samit, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, look, actually, building on what Francesco has said, actually, sometimes sort of your competitors or your market can help to be that catalyst. So, if I'm in a market and I can see that sort of someone in our lane is actually sort of driving forward with the digital transformation program, it's a very visible thing for me to be able to go to a board or to go to our leadership and say, we are going to fall behind, we are going to lose, and there is a business risk mitigation element that we're building into a transformation journey. So that is one area that I would definitely sort of look at. The second would be just around sort of where does this sit within the business? In my experience, kind of a COO function can often sort of be a good place for this to sit, mainly because, I often see sort of an intersection in digital transformation of technology, product, marketing, HR, and actually sort of someone at the C-suite that doesn't have a functional responsibility for any of those areas can be a good conduit for bringing together an integrated approach and being that exec sponsor, as the rest of the team have said.
Samit, you mentioned COO, and I guess I'm still trying to dig at this question, and indeed it's one of our discussion points today. Who should lead, and what skills do they need? The article goes on to talk about the need for executives today to leverage things like data analytics and automation and mobile applications. But Samit, you rightly put it so that it also mixes things in like marketing and HR and a variety of organizational, even soft skills that are required, change management certainly. Mm-hmm. So I'll put this out to the group as one of our big discussion points today. Who should lead, and what skills do they need? And is it possible for one person to have all of those skills? And if not, then how should that leader then bring all those skills together? Samit, what do you think?
For me personally, I think that, and again, I'll kind of bring it back to this kind of digital versus transformation piece. I actually think that there isn't enough emphasis put on sort of people, culture, training. I think I read a study that said that, I think there was a hypothesis kind of a few years ago that said that for every $10 that you spend on a piece of digital technology, you should spend $90 on training and equipping and educating the people that need to operate and deploy that technology. And so there's a huge amount of sort of change management, as you described, sort of culture shift. You've got to really look at the context of the organization. Culturally, is it a command and control, or is it an agile organization? Is it a digital native, or is it a legacy business? And so I think the skills that are required are those that sit outside of technical functionality at the sort of business level, operating. And a COO for me operates in tandem with a CEO, and so has that overarching view. People who have sort of the ability to intersect technical and kind of people skills, and those that are sort of got a growth mindset. They are not fixed in kind of a view of the world, and they are adaptable to where the world is going. I often describe sort of digital transformation journeys as you can't ever be future proof, but you have to be future flexible. And so having that adaptability, that agility to maneuver an organization dependent on the kind of external and internal circumstances are probably some of the key areas for a skill set I'd be looking for.
Interesting. You mentioned future proof. I know, Christine, when we were talking earlier before the show, you were talking, there's a big difference between transforming and then sustaining that transformation and sustaining those benefits. Christine, how do you feel the role of digital transformation leaders will develop over the next few years in order to sustain those improvements?
Well, I do believe that this is exactly what we're started talking about at the beginning, right? So we're not talking about a technical leader who knows all these has all the technical skills, but rather we need someone who is going to inspire the organization into moving to their next stage and capitalize on that disruption in order to create growth. This is why I believe that this leader needs to actually be very, very close to the business. When you want to take the people with you, you need to be able to translate into the business terms and what they do every day, how this transformation is going to take place. And also what we need to also remember is that a digital transformation or any kind of transformation of that extent is not going to affect only the employees, but also the full network of the company, the route to market, the distributors, customers, down to the end consumer. And that's actually the goal. So you need someone who is able to get those skills and make the people embrace down to the last employee speaking with the consumers outside, that level of transformation, the new tools they are going to have, the new insights they're going to have access to. Then I would see these moving as an integration within the business. It's not just about doing a big loud project now, but it's about the BAU, what happens afterwards. How do we measure the success? How do we measure the usability of that and the frequency of its use by the organization and the external partners? Do I have an internal NPS? So the way that you would see a product being developed, you also need to see the internal products that you develop and make sure that you have a plan to see how their use is sustainable over the years, how they're being maintained, how they're being used. And that should not sit with a transformation team. Transformation team should be here to implement this, and then business as usual. Have teams who are seeing how this works in the next phase. And in the future, we will see even faster, I believe, development in technology. So it will be down to that transformational leader to keep on being even more extroverted, bringing that information in the company and translating it into actual growth in line with the company strategy.
I'll put this out. Rebecca has commented, new age digital transformation leaders need to have a seat at the table, not as a technology enabler, but as corporate partners to CEOs and executive colleagues of the business units. I think that's a really important perspective. Thank you, Rebecca. I often hear from change agents, technologists that I talk to, both at the executive level and at the frontline level, that they struggle to get a seat at the table, if you will, and really function as more of an integrated, is that a word? More of a part of the business as opposed to just the technology part. So, Samit, what is your thought there? Now, you're a chief marketing officer, so I appreciate the marketing perspective from this, because ultimately what I'm hoping to do is to improve the performance of the organization, often in terms of its marketing and performance. So how do change agents get a seat at that sort of table when it comes to the innovation and being an enabler of the business?
I mean, God, speak to any marketeer and you'll see the challenge is getting a seat at the top table per se. But what our role is to demonstrate sort of how we can take that transformation, and as Christine said, sort of take it through the organization. How is that going to impact us in the marketplace? How is that going to drive business value, as kind of was said earlier? Sort of how we're going to make sure that marketing is seen as an innovator in a growth journey, take a business on a growth journey. But equally, are we able to use sort of transformation and kind of marketing or digital transformation as a vehicle, to Francesco's point, a Trojan horse to shift the organization on a transformation journey in a visible way? One of our challenges, definitely as a marketeer, is everyone's got an opinion of marketing because everyone can see it, they can feel it, they can touch it. And therefore, our biggest challenge is we're always under the microscope, but equally that I see that as an opportunity to, if we are kind of going on a journey where there is AI, or there is kind of much more no code and much more automation, sort of how can we be the vehicle that is a very visible sort of use case for sort of internal and external, examples that we can then take through the business. And to Francesco's point earlier, can we use a very small use case within marketing? So for me, as an instance, I've previously rolled out marketing automation within the organization, which has streamlined processes, reduced costs, and then allowed us to operate at more, at scale and at speed. By demonstrating that, I then built the kudos, I built the sort of the equity with the business to then demonstrate that actually we can go further, wider, and be more impactful across the business as a whole.
Interesting, Samit, and I'll put it out to everyone else, Christine and Francisco too, as well. Samit, what I'm hearing is that often, even though I may be a C-suite member, I am still in a position where I'm often advocating for my initiatives or my strategies, and may or may not always get the support that I need regardless. Christine, Francisco, do you feel that to be the case with you and with your colleagues as well? How is that working in the real world for folks that are already part of the C-suite? I mean, it sounds to me like Like it sounds to me like I need to come in with an advocacy that I'm surprised I would need, say, if I was a chief marketing officer or something like that. I'm looking to do an initiative that involves digital transformation. I have some ideas about what that means to the business, but I really need to work to get that seat at the table, even though I'm part of the C-suite already or part of the executive team already. Is that also your experience as well?
I would say definitely yes. And I think while digital transformation as a buzzword, it's something that everyone talks about, when you actually talk about changing things, because that's what transforming is, right? This is how you've been doing things so far. You've been hugely successful with that. Now let me know how we have to change it. That's not an easy conversation to have. And it is about making people uncomfortable. And how okay is the organization with being uncomfortable with where they're putting their money at? They know that if you can put a banner or you can do a TV ad, let's say, you know how much money it's going to cost, you know exactly what this is going to bring you, and it's been successful so far. And now you have to tell them, like, you have to cut from somewhere else to change the way you've been doing things, because unless you do so, you're either going to be missing in a big opportunity of growth, or you're going to be out of business in a few years. And that's not the conversation that anyone wants to listen. And I feel like this is why it's a struggle to get that seat at the table. They know what you're going to say.
Yeah, well, all right, very good. Well, I want to point us again back to the article, that the Forbes article that we talked about earlier, and partly because I want to get to a comment from Xavier here. But the article goes on to talk about, for organizations looking to capitalize on digital transformation, the ever-changing landscape today, things like data analytics and automation are key. Data analytics to leverage insights and utilize enterprise integration and automation, web mobile applications that enhance user experience while also streamlining processes, perhaps with the cloud, ultimately reducing costs, and achieving best-in-class digital transformation requires an understanding of all these cutting-edge technologies. And when done right, will pay tenfold over the organization's growth. So I want to ask about that. We've been talking about sort of this, maybe the softer skills, but Xavier brings up a good point and says, I concur with you, Rebecca. The challenge for these next generation digital leaders would be to harness data and emerging tech such as AI to create the value and create customer experiences in real time. So it's, if I'm getting this right, it's the connection now between the systems and the impact to customer experience and the use of systems to really do that. I'll start with you, Christine. What is your experience and any thoughts on how we do that?
There are a couple of things when it comes to data analytics. One, you need some data foundation. And one of the key struggles is to have a single source of truth in the organization. Because what happened in the past years was that everyone understood the value of data. A lot of people started doing things on their own within their roles and their remit, which was fantastic to enable data decision making. But this means that you end up with a very fragmented system. And that's where the first point of our conversation comes, right? You need someone to bring all this together and have a strategy behind that. Once you do that, how do you know what the data is telling you? How much data savvy are people in an organization? And that's where that $10 to product and $90 to education. Right. You really need to enable people to read the data. Otherwise, you will never be able to get the insights and turn them into actions. It will be just charts on yet another dashboard, and people will just click to download and put them in an Excel and do it all over again.
Sami, your thoughts? I know over the past couple of weeks, we've been talking about the surprising failure rate of digital transformation initiatives. Often it is this failure to link the technology that is either happening or could be happening with the real business needs and performance goals of the organizations, the strategies there. So tell me about this linkage, and what do you feel, how will that role for digital transformation develop over the next few years?
I personally think digital transformation is going to go through a digital transformation.
Really? Tell me more.
With the introduction, we're seeing it everywhere right now, sort of AI capabilities, no code, automation, sort of accelerating in such a way. I actually think that there's probably going to be a homogenization of technological capability, and actually everyone being able to leverage very similar tools to get very similar answers. And actually, that's where creativity comes into play. How are you going to turn those into creative opportunities to differentiate? Because if everyone has, the analytics tools that are using sort of those AI methodologies, actually the specialism comes in the creativity and not in the technology per se. Now, the challenge is always going to be kind of the implementation piece and sort of how we kind of stitch that together. And Christine makes a very good point in terms of kind of data, and any AI capability is only as good as the data that you're feeding into it to learn. But with sort of this chat GPT and what Google, Microsoft and others are doing, I think there's going to be a huge acceleration in the direction of kind of less technical specialism and actually more focus on partnering, collaboration, and then being able to stitch that together into something that feels meaningful on the front end to your user, be that in a B2C context or a B2B.
Indeed, Sumit. Last week we were talking about the idea. What was it? Are we in an age post-digital? In a sense, not that digital is going to go away or not be an enabler of everything, but the idea is that we're kind of beyond the idea of it being digital transformation. It's really more now about a business transformation. Francisco, what are your thoughts? Are we in a post-digital age of digital transformation?
I think it very much depends on the industries. I think there are industries that are definitely advanced, where, for instance, you don't hear people having job titles like head of digital marketing. These companies have moved on. Digital is everywhere. They have really embedded digital processes and intelligent technologies throughout the business. And other organizations where there are still sort of part of the journey. You still find a head of digital marketing. You still find pockets of the business where there isn't really automation. There isn't, there are still sort of basic practices. And then you have even like a third case, which is probably where I am at the moment with JLL, where you have situations where you have a bit of both within the same organization. So you have some business lines that are more advanced, really taking advantage of, for instance, in our case, we use Salesforce. So for some business lines, we use it with artificial intelligence capabilities. They call it Einstein AI. That really allows us to predict the sales funnel for some business lines, and other business lines literally use Salesforce as a contact reel, and they don't do anything else with it. So I think that's also where I think the people that really drive the transformation almost have to be diplomats, ambassadors of change within the organization. And I think I cannot stress enough how important it is for this change to be pushed forward as a multidisciplinary, holistic, inclusive approach, because change ultimately is scary. And one of the reasons, for instance, why certain pockets of the business do not digitize is because maybe they feel threatened. They feel threatened by a new channel, they feel threatened by new working procedure. And as Samit said earlier, it's just not about the technology, which is usually the easiest part. It's really about the change management, the people management, the reassurance, the reward structure, especially when you start touching sales processes, how that is impacting reward structures has a huge impact on the success and outcomes of a transformation initiative.
All right, very good. We are here today with Sumit Virmani, Christine Nicolau, and Francisco Federico. If you have any questions or comments for the group today, it'd be great. Just pop them into Q&A here, and we'll get to them here in the last few remaining minutes that we have of our session today. All right, before we run out of time, I do want to put out to the group one last big question. What will the role of digital transformation leaders be in 5 years' time from now? Francisco, what is your thought?
I think it's going to be more and more. I come from marketing, so my obviously point of view is from marketing. I think as marketeers, we'll have to become more and more technically savvy and the CIOs, our counterparts, will have to become more and more marketing and commercially astute, marketing oriented and commercially astute, because there is definitely a convergence of the two. We already touched on some of it earlier, talking about automation, but I think in the future, the dependence on intelligent technologies will be huge. But with it, there is also risk of standardization and homologation, and so you really need to understand how to expertly mix the technology element and the marketing creative element. And I think that will definitely be an emerging almost professional characteristic. It's going to be a competency mix that will be very precious across all seniority levels. I'm not just talking about the leader, the CMO or the talented, marketing sort of transformation director. I'm also talking about more junior resources, the senior marketing manager, the junior director. Those roles will need to really understand intimately how they can weave in technology and automation in when they throw an event or where they organize a sports sponsorship. They cannot just work in isolation and in silo as they were used to. So I think it's becoming more and more interdisciplinary in a way, especially in marketing. You need to have that ability to connect the dots rather than becoming this hyper specialized vertical figure within the organization.
Christine, your thoughts. How will the role of digital transformation leaders develop in the next 5 years?
So I feel like right now we have a digital transformation leader that's setting the foundations, right? And it's more about processes, operations, and some things of marketing, but usually that still sit in marketing. So transformation is about setting now the foundations in the company. And looking 5 to 10 years ahead, it should be more about experiences. How do I transform the experiences of those that interact with my products, that interact with my organization, that interact with my platforms? And that's where innovation is going to be key. And as all this group has said many times, bringing in all those new technologies that will emerge. We already see some of this today, but it's going to be even faster, even bigger. And that's what's going to enable this transformation of experiences.
All right. And Francisco, where do you see us in 5 years?
I definitely think in 5 years, I completely agree with Christine. I think we will definitely see a prevalence of the importance of building strong experiences. And I think we will see more and more functions of the business that are not necessarily connected to experiences today or perceived as being part of the experience today, being dragged at the forefront. For instance, customer services and customer operations in general tend to have a very strong service connotation. I think more and more these are becoming integral part of the brand experience. If you mess up in a service interaction, and I know this very well, for instance, coming from Vodafone, in one of my past experiences for us at Vodafone, our customer operations were really integral part of the brand promise, but it's not the same in many other industries. It's not, customer operations are not necessarily perceived as so central to the experience point. So I think in 5 years from now, we will see the whole organization really coming together to build these multi-touch point experiences at scale that delight, that are relevant, and that ultimately generate stickiness and growth for the organization. I think we will see more and more than that in the next 5 years. Yeah.
All right, very good. We are getting some questions or some comments in from the audience, so I thought I'd post some of them out to you folks today. I want to start with Xavier, and thank you, Xavier, because I think this is a really good point. And I'd like to point it over to Sumit, if I could. What are some of the new KPIs that should be employed to reliably measure the success of digital transformation initiatives? I think that's super important. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. Sumit, what are your thoughts?
God, it has so much dependency on kind of what the digital transformation is and what the context of it is, along the way. But what I would say is, rather than being able to provide you with a tangible KPI today, what I would say is, in the framework of the digital transformation program, that there are key milestones built in. There is a North Star that you're looking to aim for, but that there are regular touch points and KPI cadences that allow you to pivot. You're not sort of saying this is a 5 year, we're definitely going to go here, because that North Star may move because we've just 3 years this week is kind of the start of COVID lockdowns, and who would have thought that, right? And so we have to be able to have strategic long-term vision, but agility to be able to adapt and shape to external factors and forms of external forces. And so that would be the guidance that I would give, sort of have regular KPI cadences, whatever they may be, but be prepared to adapt those and shift those dependent on kind of sort of external factors.
All right. This comment coming in from Jonathan, I'd like to direct it to you, Christine, if I could. Jonathan says, there's also a big debate surrounding buy versus build for those now embarking on their digital transformation journey. Should you buy or build your own platform, specifically SaaS platform? Christine, you have a thought on that?
Yeah, we have lots of tools in the Agile. Some of them are internal and we build them. Some of them are just SaaS that we pay for, right? I don't think that this is a black or white answer. So it all depends on what's the company doing. So if you are a CPG company versus if you're a tech company, I think it's very, very different, the answer that you would get. But then you need to also prioritize. Is this about speed? Is this about building something more in the long run that is going to require way more control over it? And also, what's the security risk that we're going to take? Some companies have very strict rules, and working with the SaaS when it comes to handling your own internal data might be something that you are not even able to do. So it's all about prioritizing. Here's my goal. Here's what is most important to me at this point in time. And you might go with both. You might say, I will go with the SaaS now because this is what I need to be able to do now. And in the next 10 years, here's how I'm going to build my plan into a different internal solution.
Nice. Okay. All right. And Francisco, I have saved you also a follow-up from Vincent. And thank you, Vincent, for this. Your follow-up question would then be, with many SaaS options to choose from, what would you look for when testing these cloud-based services? Francisco, your thought on that?
Yeah, I think this is a very good question because sometimes it's very tricky to choose from the mixes. So in general, my recommendation is to really identify a couple of solid solution providers that can provide the backbone of your marketing technology stack, really make a big bet on established solution providers. And then around it, you can add smaller providers that address specific use cases. In choosing those providers, I think it's also very important to look at how they're funded, their structure, because there are so many out there that sometimes you end up maybe embracing a new tool, doing a lot of work on integration, upskilling, and then 3-4 years later on the tool disappears or gets acquired, the features get changed. So in order to de-risk it, what I usually look in a MarTech stack is to really make a couple of big bets on solid solutions that probably will be here even in 20 years, and then around them build a sort of more agile solution so that even if we lose one or two, we are not compromising the whole MarTech stack.
All right, very good. Well, that is Sumit Ramani, Christine Nicolau, and Francisco Federico. Thank you, Sumit, Christine, and Francisco for being a part of our event today. I want to close out with just a couple of minutes that we have left, hoping that each of you would provide us with a quick action item that our listeners can use to take advantage of the ideas and advice that we've talked about here today. Sumit, 60 seconds, what's your tip for us today?
My tip would be to focus on change management, learn the practice and the approach of change management, qualify in it if you can. I definitely have, and it's helped me on my journey. And that will provide you with the principles and the frameworks to take a business on a transformation journey.
Thank you, Sumit. And Christine, what's your action item for us today?
Yeah, my action item would actually be a very simple one, which would be use the language the business understands. Make sure that you're not going there with all the tech terms. Just translate everything to what resonates with people and their everyday job, and that's going to help win them over.
Nice. Thank you so much, Christine. And Francisco, 60 seconds, what's your action item for us today?
Maybe a very practical suggestion, Google digital adoption platforms. So digital adoption platforms are these tools that allow to really ensure there is long-term sustained adoption and stickiness of any new technology you implement. I would recommend to have a look at these technologies if you don't know these already, because they can really define the success of a transformation initiative.
All right. Francisco, Christine, Sumit, thank you so much. Thank you for your comments today. What a great panel today. Your perspectives and advice were really spot on. So thank you so much. I hope we get a chance to talk again soon. And thanks everyone else for being out there with us. Thank you too. Join us again next week at 1600 GMT when we'll talk with another great panel of experts, next time about realizing the ROI of artificial intelligence. It should be another great discussion. And if you'd like to find me, you can do so. I'm on LinkedIn and I'm happy to connect there. And you can check me out at my weekly podcast, the Digital Transformation Podcast. All right. Well, that'll do it for this episode of Digital Transformation Talk. Until next week, I'm Kevin Crane. Thanks for watching.